everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Experts show. I'm Dori Soukup, founder of InSPAration Management and MD Business Advisors, and we have a very special show today for you. I have Sara Shikhman. She's a leading attorney from New York City. She'll be joining us today so we can discuss ways to help you increase employee retention, keep them motivated, and avoid legal mistakes as well as business mistakes. We already have a ton of questions that came in, and since you are live with us today, if you too have questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. We are also live on Facebook and Instagram, so if you are there, feel free to communicate. I have some of my team members that are manning all these platforms, so feel free to submit your questions so we can help you. I am so excited. We have hundreds of people with us today, and we are reaching to not only all over the US, but also globally. We have people with us from Romania, of course, from Canada, from Singapore, China, Malaysia. So good to have you all with us. I'm so glad that we could be of service to all of you. So let me start by first introducing my great guest, Sara Shikhman. As I mentioned, she's a leading attorney with Lengea Law. They are a firm that actually caters specifically to medical spa industry as well as dental industry. They help people start up a medical spa or any kind of business that needs a lot of legal support and help to make sure that they are starting on the right foot. They also help people plan their exit strategies. So they do all sorts of legal support for our community and other folks as well. So I am so excited to have Sara with me today. Welcome, Sara, to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Dori. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our conversation and helping people together.
Yes, thank you. By the way, Sara is also an author. You can find her book on Amazon. It's called Medspa Confidential. And before I dive in, if you also would like to get a copy of my book, Medical Aesthetics Success, you can go to inspirationmanagement.com and get it, or also you can go to Amazon and get a copy. So let's dive right in, Sara. I want to start by asking, since we want to discuss team issues today, I think a good place to start would be, what do you think are the biggest challenges you are seeing right now with our industry as far as employee legal issues or challenges that owners actually have within their practices?
I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing is retaining top talent. Really, not so much attracting the talent in the first place, but keeping the good people and figuring out a way to motivate them to stay for the long term, to think like an owner, and to really perform to their best abilities is the number one challenge I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, that's one of the main reasons we wanted to do something like this, because us too, as a business firm, we tend to see the same challenges as you. As a matter of fact, I was just doing a call with one of our members this week, and sometimes the pain that they experience, they had an injector that left. Actually, they let her go. And as soon as they let her go, she hit the phone, texting and calling all the clients that she had previously helped in their medical spa. And the only way she really found out about it is one of her friends was one of the people that she texted. So right away, of course, she contacted, her legal representative, and those are some of the issues that we are having. So what can they do in a situation like this?
There are two main ways that people can protect themselves. One is the legal way and one is the business way. And I think that's part of the reason why this webinar is so good that we're doing it together, because the legal alone will not fix the issues and the business alone will not fix the issues. Only working together do the issues really get fixed. So from the legal perspective, what people can do is have really good contracts, like really to the maximum allowable limits of the laws of their state. So if their state permits non-competes and non-solicitations and training reimbursement contracts and the whole works, legally, I would certainly recommend doing that. And it's really state specific. So it's not like what would work in New York will work in California, will work in Florida. It's really different. So that's like the sticks. The sticks is like the things that you really, keep the tight hold on the people with. But you also need the legal kind of carrots. So having a legal process for promoting people and having contracts in place that also say, like, in 2 years you can get this type of bonus or this type of equity or this type of recognition, whatever, also helps. So from the legal perspective, you need the legal carrots and the legal sticks.
Yeah, makes sense. So, what are some of the most important agreements that they should have to protect themselves and also to let the employee know what is the situation in working with them?
I think at the foundation, every person needs to have either an independent contractor agreement or an employment agreement. Like, it's surprising to me how many practices don't have one at all. So at the very base, just having that agreement that spells out things like how the person gets paid and what the bonus is based on and things like that. And then second is having an employee handbook that sets out like your expectations for these smaller things, but very important things, how the person will behave. Like, can they show up one day to your practice and have purple hair? If their first appointment is at 9 a.m., can they show up at 9:10? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think having a handbook and having a contract with people is good. And then also having a non-compete agreement, a non-solicitation agreement, a non-disclosure provision that could be part of those agreements. And then taking it to the next level, like a training reimbursement contract, where if you're hiring someone brand new and you're giving them training, having a contract that basically says, my expectation is that you're going to stay here for 2 years or 3 years. And if you don't, you have to pay us back for all the training, some of the training, something like that. So those things are, I think, that are the basics.
Yeah, that was very valuable information. As a matter of fact, we had a question come in exactly about the educational agreement. They invested all this money in someone and they ended up leaving and working down the street, and they had no agreement like this, which really is so sad for me because, people open up a business, they spend more time sometimes picking a laser or a piece of equipment over working with someone like you to make sure they have all their legal documentation in order, or speaking with someone like us to make sure that they set up their team for success and not have them leave. So I'm so glad you shared those things with everyone. I hope you wrote those agreements down, because if you didn't, or if you don't have them, you definitely need to have them to protect yourself, to protect your business, and make sure you are on the right path. So I would do a check of all the agreements that you have and make sure you have that one. So we have a lot of questions that came in, Sara. So I have my partner in crime here, Sharon. She's also going to be asking questions that came in. And we can take as many as we can with our time that we have together. And one of the things that I get often, you mentioned a little earlier about the difference between independent contractors or an employee and having the appropriate documentation or agreement. I'm not a big fan of independent contractors. I don't know how you feel, but I prefer for a business to have actual employees. So even if you want to start them up initially as an independent contractor to see how they do after 30 days and then move them into an employee, what's your take on, from a legal aspect, what way is better to hire a team? Which agreement should they have?
Good question. I think it really depends on the business and their size. A lot of times, the employee mentality is very different than the independent contractor mentality. So I think you're right in the sense where if you just have a bunch of independent contractors, even if they're well paid, they think like independent contractors and they think that you see them as independent contractors. And so they become less invested in your business, and they perceive that you're less invested in them. So I do think overall for a business, it is better to have employees in the long term. But in the short term, when someone's just starting out, let's say it's like your first hire and you're really not sure, it is okay to hire them first as an independent contractor. Just keep in mind that just because you call them an independent contractor doesn't make them an independent contractor. So if you don't pass the IRS test or the state specific test for what's an independent contractor, whether your contract says independent contractor or not doesn't matter. So just make sure if you're really exercising like deep control over their schedule, how they're supposed to treat patients, what they're supposed to do, who's supervising them, all that kind of stuff. If you're really closely supervising them, it's hard to meet the independent contractor test. So it's better legally to hire people as employees for sure in this industry, especially if we're talking about your injectors and they're full-time or nearly full-time, they should really be employees.
For sure. I just think you could manage them a lot better. And since we're talking about motivation and rewards and benefits and compensation, how we can really maintain that retention, it would be super difficult to maintain that with an independent contractor versus actually an employee. So it might cost you a little bit more to pay an employee, but you know what? It's a lot cheaper than having an independent contractor come into your house and then end up leaving with all the clients that you basically help them obtain. So keep that in mind when you're doing your compensation and all your plans.
I agree with you 100%.
So good, thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about, we're talking about motivation. I think motivation is also about performance, because I think the more someone performs at a higher level, the more motivated I believe they are. The more they're proud of their work, the more motivated they are. You know, I get asked that question all the time. What should the expectations be from a actual injector or your esthetician or your laser tech? And one of the things we find most often is that most medical spas don't really have performance expectations. So I just wanted to give people an idea. So we have a lot of successful medical spas that we work with, and they think that when an injector generates $1 million in revenue for them, that they're doing good. So I just crunched some numbers just to give you an idea of what the performance expectations should be from a medical spa. So if they're working a 40-hour week, and let's say they're only doing one client an hour, just one an hour. Now remember, Botox is 15 minutes, so I'm being super conservative. And if they average $750 a client, which it should be very achievable. Yeah, most people don't really achieve that number. Most people achieve like a $300 volume per guest, revenue per guest. So if they did that 1 hour appointment, 40 hours, that's $129,000 in 1 month that they can generate for you. So that's $1.5 million that they can generate for you. That's a lot of money. So that's why it's so important to really pay attention to the relationship that you have with your injector. And I wanted to bring that forth because you should be able to do everything you can in your power to make sure that that person is motivated, is happy, you have a great work environment for them. And I would love to take a poll from our audience today. If you know your numbers, how much your average injector is generating for you, I would love it if you could put it in the chat just to give us an idea where everybody is. So if we're talking about motivation and you know that they're able to generate that kind of money, so I'm going to ask our audience, what are you doing right now to be able to help your injectors perform at that level? And one of the things we see most often missing, Sara, is the investment in education. It's like, how much are you investing in education to really help that person be able to achieve that number? Which brings me to a compensation question for you, Sara. There's a big big misunderstanding, I think, around that topic, compensation. So if somebody's generating 1.5 million for you, how can we compensate that person in a way, like I know what we teach, but I want to hear it from you from a legal standpoint. How can we, let's say I own the place, how can we compensate someone legally that's producing 1.5 million, let's say, in revenue?
So legally, it could have a couple of different components, right? At the end of the day, you would figure out what percentage of that revenue you're comfortable making your total compensation package, right? So if they're bringing in 1.5, which would be, in my opinion, a great injector, top 10%. So let's say your budget is to pay them 18% of that, or 15% of that, or 20% of that. We could have a discussion on what that percent should be. But let's say your budget is that. You should pay them a good base salary so that they're not nervous. And so they're not making claims against you that you're not paying them enough. And then pay them a bonus based on achieving whatever it is that you want them to achieve. So a goal goes back to having set expectations, like Dori said. So you would have a job description that's very detailed, that talks about what you expect of the person, not just in numbers, but also in teamwork, in attending conferences, in teaching others, in doing follow-up calls, in getting Google reviews, whatever it is. And then make some percentage of compensation based on achieving whatever goals you want people to reach. And then also, as people get more and more senior, have tiers that say, let's say in 2 years, we're going to give you a $10,000 or $5,000 a year CME reimbursement. And then in 4 years, we're going to get you an assistant. And in 5 years, we're going to give you some sort of equity package. So really giving people like a structure legally, I think works really well, but not really making the structure just, we're going to give you 20% of revenue, that's it. That's not legally good, and business-wise, not good.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of people, when we first start working with them, that's exactly what they do. They just, pay that high hourly rate and call it a day. But some people, that are fearful of the term fee splitting. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because that's what makes them like put this wall up and say, oh, but I'm not supposed to be paying like that, because maybe they heard it from another attorney that, scared the heck out of them or whatever. So can you speak on that a little bit so everybody's clear on it?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of misconception about that. A lot of traditional fee splitting has to do with incentivizing people to come in and then bill insurance for a treatment. So at most med spas or at most cosmetic dental practices, that's not happening. The type of fee splitting that's prohibited is really having to do with straight commission for somebody. And even that is not prohibited in every state. So it's not like you could just say in X state, you can't pay percentages. It's more that you can't just 100% make somebody's salary a percentage in medical. That would go against legal rules in most states. But you can absolutely have a structure where somebody gets paid a base salary plus performance-based bonuses that are not just straight percentages, but maybe are based on tiers of revenue that the person has to achieve, among other things. That would be totally okay.
Yeah, that's great. And that's exactly what we teach through the compensation model that we do. We believe in a performance-based compensation model and a compensation mix, like you just said. That is so smart. And if everybody would set up that kind of compensation model, including benefits, rewards, educational fund, ability to have equity in some way, that's how you're going to keep them motivated, and that's how you're going to retain them. I think those are such golden words that we're sharing with you that I would definitely highly recommend that you take a look at your current compensation model and see how else you can change it to improve it. So let's take some questions from our audience with us, and we can continue our conversations.
Absolutely. So Julie asked, what is the best pay plan for injectors, and what type of that fee splitting performance-based compensation, how can they do it legally, and what is the best?
Well, we kind of just answered that question. Yeah. So the compensation model is definitely should be a mix. And I think as long as it's a cash type of business in a medical spa environment, if I understood Sara properly, there is no such thing as fee splitting as long as you're paying them a base plus bonuses plus some kind of a reward. I think what Sara was saying is that that's more geared towards insurance based. Is that correct, Sara?
Yeah, I think what I was saying is in most of the medical spa businesses, as we know them, the traditional fee splitting that's insurance based does not really apply.
Yeah.
It would still be bad in most med spa or cosmetic dentistry or any kind of non-insurance based practice if you just have someone be paid a straight commission.
Right.
So I would say stay away from straight commission.
Yeah.
In most states, that's not going to be compliant.
Yeah.
But what will be compliant in most states is paying someone a base. Let's just use a number, $75,000 a year. And then if your total budget is, let's say, 18% of their total, whatever they're bringing in, taking that number and saying, okay, my base was 75,000, my total budget is 18% of 1.5 million. Okay, for the rest of it, I'm going to make it variable based on performance and making their sales performance only one component. Right. And for the sales performance component, not making it a percentage, but making it more like tiers.
And that's exactly what we help them do. Like we come up with a revenue per guest that they should average, and then they have a tiered bonus that they can achieve. Now, as far as the percentages, don't get hung up on the percentages that you're going to pay them. One of the tips I can give you is if you go to salary.com and you punch in a certain position in your zip code, you're going to be able to see a range of a low, medium, and high compensation for every position. And then what we do is we reverse engineer those numbers to be able to provide them with competitive pay for that area that you're in and keep them happy and excited about being there. So it takes a lot to set up a compensation model, you guys. So don't just pick numbers out of thin air, because that would not be a good thing for your business. So thank you for your question. What else?
So that sparked a hot round of comments and questions. So combining a few of them, if the base pay is a good base pay, or some of the team members have said they're not motivated by money, Pam specifically asked that, what else can you offer to keep them excited?
Yeah. And it's funny to me that to hear that some people are not motivated by money. And there might be some. But at the end of the day, why do we get up in the morning? So I would really start with the why. Why are you getting up in the morning and going to work if you don't need the money, or if you're not motivated by money? So we need to get to that first and then come up with a good plan. But there are so many other things that you can reward people for. Sara had mentioned some, but I would reward them also for enrolling members, reward them for being able to get testimonials, video testimonials, being able to be a good team worker, having a high retention rate with your clients. So we have a whole series of KPIs that you can actually measure and be able to reward towards it. I love education as also a reward, because your clinical team loves education. I've noticed that over the years. So why not give them that as an opportunity to keep enhancing their skills? So those are just few of the things that you can do in addition to what we already discussed.
Thank you. And Tracy had a quick follow-up on that, which is, what about tipping? Is that legal?
Tipping in a medical spa, Sara.
That's very state specific. So accepting tips, some nursing boards in some states, for example, say that that's unethical, and some say nothing, and some say that's totally okay as long as it's reasonable. So that's a super state specific answer, unfortunately. So we'd have to have like a one-on-one consultation for me to tell you.
Yeah.
But actually jumping back to the previous question, I wanted to add, what we see sometimes works is having our clients ask their team, okay, what out of these 10 things, what motivates you? Flexibility, financial rewards, recognition, respect, the ability to go to conferences, like making a list of the things that you can offer, and then really understanding each person's like unique motivations. I do think some people are less motivated by money and, for example, are much more motivated by flexibility. So maybe your reward for them after working with you for a year could be that they can pick which 4 days of the week or 3 days they're going to work. Where for them, that would be so much more valuable than you giving them a 10 or 20% raise.
Yeah.
Whereas for somebody else, they would love a 10% raise.
Yeah.
So I think customizing it a little bit for people also works pretty well.
Yes. And, I had pulled out some statistics just to give you guys an idea, too, of what employees really want. So 51% want good work-life balance. So exactly what we're talking about. 43% wanted to be able to have a great place to work. Another one wants good compensation and benefit. That was 41%. 36% was continuous training. 34% is organizational stability. So these are some of the things, according to a recent survey, what people are looking for. So keep that in mind as you're building your culture, setting your foundation, building your business model. Those are all things that you can really do to help retain your employees. So thank you for sharing that, Sarah. That was great. What else do we have?
So Elizabeth asked, when you're in the process of building your team, and she's in the state of Florida, what's necessary on the medical part to have? Is it doctor, surgeon, dermatologist? So it's a state-specific question.
I don't understand the question. What do you mean?
So what legal aspects do you need to
does she need a medical director, or what is her position?
Question.
I think I understand the question. I could answer this one.
Okay.
I could spot the legal question from a faraway distance. So in Florida, the regulations are that if your business is primarily dermatologic services, then even if you're a nurse practitioner with full autonomy, you still need a medical director who is a board certified or board eligible plastic surgeon or dermatologist. So in Florida, you'd still need that medical director if what you're doing is primarily dermatologic. But if, let's say, what you're doing is semaglutide and hormone replacement and stuff like that, then the rules are a little bit different.
So it depends on what position or what treatments they're doing in the actual facility.
Exactly.
Okay. Very interesting. Can a nurse own a medical spa in the state of Florida?
Yes. So Florida is excellent at this, where Florida does not require what's called an MSO or MSA structure. So in Florida, a nurse, and when we say a nurse, let's say a registered nurse or even a business person can own a medical spa in Florida.
Okay, because I just had one of our members actually asked me that question. I was going to send them to you. They have a nurse who just moved down from New York, and they were told that she couldn't inject in the state of Florida as a nurse. So she can only do the weight loss? Or can she inject under a doctor?
Good question. So there are kind of two separate questions. One is who can own, and two is who can perform the treatment. So in Florida, anyone can own a medical spa. But in terms of who can perform a treatment, technically the law limits it to MDs, DOs, NPs, and PAs. Okay. So RNs technically cannot be injecting in Florida, things like Botox. However, recently, as of about a year ago, a new process has come into play where, and some of our clients have done this with our help, where you basically petition the board, you send them a request to be allowed to inject based on your training and experience and the supervisory relationship you have with an MD. And then the board has a quick meeting about it with you, and they approve you to do it. So that would be the way for an RN to do it in Florida, to put together one of these petitions, send it into to the board or the Department of Health. They would have a hearing about it. It takes about 90 days to hear back and get the hearing scheduled.
Nice.
And then an RN would theoretically get approved as long as he or she would meet all the criteria.
Yeah, that's very nice. Are other states doing that now?
Depends. So yes and no. In some states, like for example, New York, RNs can just do injections. They don't need the special permission. In other states, yes, RNs can go and petition and ask. But Florida is pretty unique because up until last year, they didn't really allow people to do this, or they would keep saying no. They kept saying, no, you can't do it, even if you have lots of training. But as of about last year, they started saying yes. So
Nice.
I think the trends are changing, where even in states where traditionally RNs have not been able to inject, now they're getting more and more ability to do so.
Nice. Hallelujah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other questions do we have?
So Gina asked, what happens if your states require an MSO but you don't use it?
You get in trouble.
Yeah. I think Dori said it exactly correctly. You get in trouble, and it's much more expensive than setting up an MSO in the first place. So I would not recommend that path.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. Actually, what we're seeing a lot now, Sarah, is a lot of nurse practitioners there's like a big movement of nurse practitioners going out and creating their own business. And, again, depending on the state, that's just so many rules and guidelines for that. So are there some legalities? If I'm an NP with us today, what would be a good thing for me to keep in mind if I'm thinking about doing that?
If you're an NP starting this kind of business, I would check if your state has independent practice authority for NPs. And then also check if your state allows, even if your state has independent practice authority for NPs, if your state allows NPs within their scope of practice to open up their own aesthetics practice, not primary care, but aesthetics, or whatever your educational specialty is. So it's a really state-specific question. I would say the best thing for an NP would be to talk to a lawyer licensed in the state to figure it out.
Yeah, good advice. All right, what else do we have? What other questions?
So along the lines of NP and service agreements, one of our audience members, she's wanting to remain anonymous at the moment, asked, when is it good for a nurse to bring on a nurse practitioner injector under an MSA? When would that MSA be recommended or required?
Well, in a state where an MSA or an MSO is required, you would want to do that as soon as possible. Like as soon as you're opening your business, before you do anything, you would want to set up this MSO and MSA. So that would be like step number one, because technically you're not allowed to hire medical professionals in a state that requires an MSO and MSA unless you have this structure set up. So you would be hiring the people illegally if you hire them first and then set up the MSO or MSA.
Yeah. So we have so many people that reach out to us that are just starting to plan their business. And that's really the first thing usually we talk to them about, is what they can and cannot do. And of course, we're not legal representation, so we always refer them to you, Sarah, so you can start there. And I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake. Like, we had a dentist contact us a couple of weeks ago. She already rented the place. She already spent $400,000 on lasers. And now she's just starting to find out. She's in Texas. Now she's just trying to find out, what is she able to do and not do. Those are the mistakes that people sometimes make. And I don't know about the laws in Texas, so I gave her your information, actually. She should be reaching out to you, Sarah. But, what happens in a situation like this? Can a dentist operate in the state of Texas as a medical spa?
So our firm works in Texas, and a few of my colleagues are licensed there. I don't know off the top of my head, actually, the answer to that question. So I don't want to answer it incorrectly. So I'm not sure, but it's a really also one of these questions that's super state specific. Every state will be pretty different. And yeah, it's like you're spending a lot of money and opening a business, but first you have to make sure that the legal setup is correct.
Yeah.
And you know from people we've represented, you know, if we come into the game late, once you've already had a board investigation, it's just more expensive and much more stressful for the practice. So it's better to just do it ahead of time. And the same thing with compensation and injector agreements, right? Like sometimes people get burned by an injector leaving and then them not having any contracts or having like some weird, you know, template contract that you found on the internet and just change some things. And then you decide, oh, now for the next one, I'm going to do it. It's better to make the investment and really think about it as an investment in your business ahead of time rather than waiting for a blow up to happen.
Yeah. So one of the things we notice that motivates also employees, specifically injectors or even esthetician, anybody that's showing results, is doing marketing on social media. You know, everybody wants to be on Instagram and showing their work and this and that. So what's a rule of thumb when it comes to legality, Sara, to allow my team, let's say I have a team of injectors, how can they do that? I can protect my business, still give them the opportunity to gain exposure and build some buzz about us, but do it legally.
Great question. And there are a couple of different ways of doing it. The best way is if your practice sets up the social media accounts for them and has the contracts for this. And then while they're working with you, they would post on those social media accounts. So let's say the practice's name is ABC and my name is Injector Sara. So my social media account would be ABC Injector Sara. And I would post before and afters and whatever I wanted. But when my employment ends, the account will go back to the practice and would be managed by the practice. I wouldn't own the account. So that's one way of doing it, and having the legal paperwork to support this, I think it would be the best. But it's hard to do because a lot of times people come into a practice and they already have an established social media account and they want to post on their account. So in that situation, what you can do is you can give people the right to repost things from your Instagram. So legally, when a patient consents to you posting their photos, they're giving consent to the practice. They're not giving consent to Injector Sara or Injector Dori. They're giving consent to the practice. And then the practice is giving a license to the individual injector to repost the image. So I think it's better if the practice always posts the image first on their master account, but then lets the individual injectors on their personal Instagrams repost the images, and then also has an agreement with them saying, when your employment ends, all those images, your licensing agreement ends, and they have to be deleted from your social media. That's the second bet.
Yeah, so that's the advice we usually give, but you just taught me something new, is having the agreement that goes with it, with the business and the person's name. So we have not been doing that. So I'm definitely going to start teaching that so they can come to you and get that agreement attached to the Instagram or whatever platform they're using. So that was great advice. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah. We'll take a couple more questions. We have about 5 minutes more. So if anybody has an urgent question that they want to ask, because we are almost out of time. Yes, Danny?
Yeah, we had Monica here. She said that she had an anonymous complaint filed against her place, and she wants to know, is there a way to find out who did it, and is there anything she can do? She let go of an independent contractor, and the complaint was that I set expectations that are more of an employee.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about a little earlier. So is there a way to find out from an anonymous complaint of who it was?
No. So good question. Typically in these proceedings, there's no right for the person who against whom the complaint is filed to find out who it is. So they don't have to tell you. They can tell you, but they don't have to. So usually I would say that's a fruitless search. Forget about it. Forget about thinking who did it.
Yeah.
Think about what you can do to protect yourself to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And put the processes or systems in place or make changes to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
You may never find out who did it.
Yeah.
But think about how to address it for the future.
Yeah, very good advice. One other thing I want to address is texting. A lot of injectors or team members begin a relationship with their clients by giving them their cell number and being able to text back and forth. This is something that we teach against. We should have a Medspa text line, and that's how they should be communicating. But yet it happens. So are there some things an owner can do if a team member is like violating that rule and they're starting to gather people's informations on their cell number?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like that should be 100% against the rules, and you shouldn't facilitate that in any way. Like, yes, you want people to do callbacks and follow-ups, but you have a virtual phone number that all your injectors would install on their phone, and then they can text very easily from there. They don't have to use their personal phone. In your employee handbook, that should be a violation of your policies, texting clients directly from a personal device. You should give them a few performance warnings if they're keep doing it, and then you should terminate the person, because what they're doing is eventually they're going to build up this database. They're not following your processes. You don't want to have someone around who's not doing what they're supposed to do. And this is something really important. So I would say have a handbook that outlines this as a no. Follow the process in the handbook to give them warnings, and then terminate their employment. It's not worth having people who are not following the rules.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's how your team starts feeling negative, and they start seeing that you're letting one person get away with something, and how come they can do it this way and I can't do it that way? It creates this whole can of worms in your place, and it really ruins the culture that you're trying to build. So I would definitely keep an eye on that.
You have to have standards, like for your team, for your patients. Like the same thing if a patient comes in and they're not the kind of patient you want to treat, and they're like disrespectful to your staff, or they cancel appointments last minute, like you have to say no to things, right? That's what business is. You have to realize like some things are just not worth it.
Yeah. I think for all the owners that are with us today, I think if you start from the hiring process, setting your expectations, you have the position description, you have your employee manuals, all your agreement, you're setting those standards from the very beginning, you're gonna cut a lot of those problems out. But if you're just doing this method of hiring, oh yeah, she's breathing, come on in. That's how you start getting in trouble. So you have to really do things from the beginning and do them properly. That's what I have to say about that. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the truer words have not been spoken. I mean, that's right. And it's about having the right expectations in place, the right paperwork in place, and just really sticking by it, so that if somebody doesn't want to work with you because they don't want to sign your non-compete, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. Well, we are right at the time here, Sara. Is there any last minute advice you want to share with anyone?
I think that this time of year, the holidays, is when a lot of stressful situations happen with employees, with clients, with just life. And my advice is more of like the practical, like just remember that just take it one day at a time, and you're doing your best. Things will happen. Make sure to have like a consultant on call, a lawyer and a business consultant, so that if something happens, you can call someone and they can walk you off the ledge and quickly solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because things happen in every business, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Most problems are totally solvable.
Exactly. I think that's the key right there, is every problem is solvable. Of course, you want to try to avoid them before they even happen. But if they do happen because you didn't do the proper steps, at least now moving forward, you have some things that you discovered that would be helpful for you. And Sara, we definitely need to do a whole series of these interviews because we have a lot more questions that were coming in. And I know we ran out of time, but we definitely need to get together again. Thank you so much for being with us. I know you offer your consultation process to our community. So do you want to share with someone if they have some legal issues they need to discuss, or if they need some new agreements? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, people can email us at info@lengealaw.com. People can go on our website and schedule a free 15-minute consultation, which is lengealaw.com. And, we're available. You could text message us, call us, email us, and we'll be there for you. And we're happy to help you with any sort of legal question in healthcare that you may have.
That's very nice. And we'll put your contact information below this video. If you are with us on social media, please connect with us so you can stay up to date to all the different events that we are doing. I'm actually doing a webinar this week at 7 p.m. for the Empire Medical Group. So if you'd like to join us, it's going to be about how to perform a high ticket program consultation. So if you'd like to join us, you can go to InSPAration Management and send in a note. And if you don't have a way to work with someone like InSPAration Management, you can go to our website and reserve a success planning session so we can help guide you through also some of the business challenges that you might be having. So again, thank you, Sara, for so much. If you too are an expert and you'd like to be on the show, you can go to meettheexperts.com and sign up, and we will love to have you as an expert helping the industry and our community. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Sara. It was a pleasure. Until next time, stay inspired. Bye now.